I already have my software set up for streaming, and my stream today kept cutting in and out. For some reason, I'm having issues with my internet, and I don't know why. So I thought I might remake part of what I talked about in my live as a short, quick video without editing. I do want to try to edit more videos, but I'm not very good at editing, in the way it comes out kind of hit and miss. I'm also not very good with thumbnails. But one thing that has not changed is my passion and joy for talking about spirituality and religion. I like history and spirituality and religion, martial arts, and video games. It's just who I am. I'm just one of those types of individuals. I also like literature and reading and books, movies and TV shows. I like a lot of stuff. And I've tried to focus and narrow a lot of the conversations in my videos to be more around the spiritual stuff, just for the simple fact that most of the interactions that I get here on this YouTube channel are around spirituality. I separated my gaming stuff out into my own gaming channel, and when it comes to martial arts, I've started talking about it less, just due to the fact that when you talk with people online, you tend to get a lot of trolls with martial arts because you get very strong opinions of why you should do martial arts. Is it specifically for self-defense? Is it specifically for spiritual reasons and self-enlightenment? Is it for exercise and getting in shape? And then there's arguments over which style is the best and which one's not the best. And when you have people online, it's literally just words. So those types of conversations are not as enjoyable for me. Even though I love talking about martial arts still and talking about theory and practice and how you can use it, I would much rather go to my class and spar with students and talk to my teacher and actually apply it in pressured situations, like pressure test techniques, versus theorize online about that stuff. Spirituality, however, is unique in the fact that it's opinion based. All religion and all spirituality comes out of people's interpretation about our reality and our place inside of it. And I think religion is looking for a way to explain or interact with something that is unexplainable or possibly doesn't even exist. And that's why it, to me, makes for a very good conversation. When it comes to martial arts, you can simply ask yourself, does it work, by putting yourself in a situation? Now, that might be situational. And if you're out and about and you're trying to defend yourself, the number of attackers and how skilled or how violent the attack comes, and if you're prepared or what state of mind you're in, or if you're surrounded, or if you're protecting someone, or if there's weapons involved, there's factors that can make your certainty that your art and your training is effective might be ineffective in some situations. Likewise, you might be doing a very crappy martial arts, but you run into someone who's just not very skilled, and you end up beating them anyway with something that traditionally wouldn't work in most circumstances. So you at least have a way of testing, whether that be through practice and training and sparring, or if you ran into a real altercation. You don't have that same thing when it comes to spirituality. How do you prove spirituality? Anything that happens that we don't have a specific science to prove then becomes belief-based. So if you say, I can heal through energy vibration, through spiritual healing, through etheric touch, Reiki, quantum vibrational healing, any of those healing methods, or casting spells or whatever, how do you prove that what you did worked? If the person got better, you can make the claim, well, my healing worked. If the person doesn't get better, you can make the claim that, oh, they did not receive the healing, or they were closed off to it, or other factors applied after the fact, or I guess I was just having an off day. So there's excuses for failure, and then there's justifications for success in one aspect. Okay, let's say you're protecting or warding your house, and you put a shield around your house. How do you know that actually protected it? I have had no break-ins, and no one's assaulted me, and my house is still here, and I'm perfectly fine. Well, there's this old story my grandfather used to tell me. There was a man driving on a train, or riding on a train with some other people, and he saw this person sitting next to a window, and he kept ripping up pieces of paper and throwing it out the window. And the guy's like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm keeping the tigers away. You are, by throwing papers out the window? Yes, it keeps the tigers away. Well, does it work? The guy stopped ripping for a second and looked at him, and he's like, do you see any tigers? I think this is a very good way of painting traditions and practices that we do inside of spirituality, which brought me to the whole point of what I wanted to do a live with. I wanted to have an interaction and have a conversation with people talking about spiritual traditions that are passed by word of mouth, or even going off the book. So I've had this reoccurring theme over the last year to 2 years, maybe 3 years by this point, where I've noticed that a lot of people repeat information. I'm calling it regurgitation because I'm equating it to someone throwing up, because it's just complete nonsense that is spilled out that nobody really wants anyway, but people just keep spitting it out, acting like it's the greatest thing in the world, when it's like, why are you regurgitating nothingness without having sustenance behind it? You know, why aren't you cooking a meal and showing how the meal is prepared versus just regurgitating what other people say because they said it? You're taking in what others say and you're spitting out garbage and passing it along. And to me, I think it does a disservice to the community as a whole, and it does a disservice to individuals who are brand new, and it's a disservice to yourself because you're buying into drinking the Kool-Aid of somebody else's religion and spirituality because they said so. I've seen the same thing with martial arts. There has been styles I've looked into that make these outlandish claims, which we cannot prove. But now that we have more information and there's more resources available, some of this stuff is starting to get proved. I remember this one system, and I don't want to name names because I really don't want to get into this whole war over systems. This person made this claim of this system being this ancient Chinese tradition. And one of his students, one of his best students, by the way, this system was effective in combat, and it was effective in tournaments. Most of his students were winning tournaments regularly. So one of his most dedicated students went to China to look for the temple of where this originally came from hundreds of years ago. Didn't exist. Nobody had heard of it. And when he came back and asked his shifu, which is one of the words for a teacher, lao shi is also a word. Shifu is like a master teacher, but we're not going to get into that. Most people in America who teach Chinese martial arts refer to themselves as shifu or lao shi. Lao shi literally means teacher, by the way. So he asked his shifu about, I wasn't able to find it. His shifu got pissed, told him to never go there again. It was later came out in an article and it was proven that basically this guy bullshitted where he got his art from and made this false backstory. It was a selling point to make it sound mysterious. He was a martial artist and he was an effective martial artist, but it was a bullshit backstory. This could happen with all of these spiritualities, and it doesn't just apply to New Age Reconstruction spiritualities. This also applies to old spiritualities. If you take Christianity, and I'm not trying to attack Christians, I realize the majority of the country is Christian, but a lot of people want to ask themselves, how do you know the Bible is right? What's the word of God? Says who? Everything we know about religion and spirituality is introduced to us. It's taught to us by our parents, by our culture, by our society, by people around us. We are told what religion is, and then we interpret and analyze things and come up with our own opinion of spirituality and religion. None of this stuff is provable. It's blind faith. So why do you believe in the words of somebody else? Oh, because it's a word from God or a prophet or something. So they say. Who's the first person who wrote it down? Where were they and how did they get this message from God? Why does God not communicate to all of us? These questions are not specific to Christianity. It's every religion and spirituality out there, especially this New Age stuff. We have a lot of people making these claims. Oh, I come from a family of witches and a long line of witchcraft and blah, 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 and I was initiated. Prove it. Well, we didn't write it down, of course. It's just our family stuff. Oh, okay. Let's take Christianity again. So in my country, in the United States, I think according to census records online, roughly 70%, maybe 80%, somewhere between 70 and 80% of the country has at least told the government through census records. Actually, see, the government doesn't track religion anymore. There were online collections of data where they claim 70 to 80% of the country is supposed to be Christian. I don't know how real that is. I just Googled it, how much of the country is Christian. That's the type of stuff that came back. So I don't know how accurate that is, but it's not from census records. That I misspoke there. But it sounds pretty legit. And then when I look up how many are New Age spiritual type stuff, and granted, a lot of people make the claim, well, a lot of them don't reveal themselves. They're not going to say, so they're not going to be able to get a true number. But it comes up as less than 1%. Less than 2% of the country, I think, is a reasonable a guesstimation. I think it's a reasonable guesstimation to say 2% of the country is some form of New Age spirituality. pagan, heathen, whatever. I think that's reasonable. Now you can look at other stuff, like some of the alternative stuff, like that you don't find as often, like Buddhism and stuff, and then the number gets larger because it has its own number. But specifically, all of the individuals that call themselves witches or druids or heathens or pagans, that particular group seems to be less than 1%, according to some of this online research that I've done, if you want to believe that. So it's a very small group of people versus 70% of the country, roughly. If 70% of the country does some form of Christianity or Abrahamic religion, and then you take some of the major holidays, it is a nationally recognized holiday to do Christmas. Does every single family do Christmas the same way? No. Then how can you say these practices are specifically Christian practices versus family practices? They are doing it for a Christian holiday. They are doing it based upon their family being Christian. But not every single family does it the exact same way. And I think the same thing can be applied to New Age spirituality stuff. So when you have claims of people saying, oh, well, my family does is witchcraft, it could just be folk traditions their family has passed down. Does that make it actually witchcraft? In fact, most people can't define what witchcraft is or what a witch is. They use the term witch generically. You might as well just say magician and magic because of how generic it is. And there's not one specific way of practicing. You have some commonalities, but not many. Not many. I had read in numerous places, and I don't remember sources. Like I said, if I don't have sources, I'll tell you I don't have sources. This is the time I don't have sources. I remember hearing it somewhere, don't remember from where, but it makes sense to me logically that each family would have their own tradition of folk traditions, whether call it paganism, call it witchcraft, call it whatever. They had traditions that predate Christianity that were passed down through the generations. When the family converted into Christianity, which most families have, not all, but the majority of families in the U.S. had at some point, even if it's been the last 200-300 years, most of them have converted to some form of Christianity. They kept family traditions alive. So those could be connected with these ancient things, but we don't have, it's not clean anymore, right? It's not a clean, clear, this is pagan. You have traditions that were passed down. If you think of this like a soup, right? Your life is a soup, and everything that you throw into it changes what it is. You can't tell me that if you're building a vegetable soup, it is now purely vegetables because you plucked out the pieces of meat. The meat got in there, the Christianity got in there and changed the soup into a stew, and now it's a stew. You can try to say it's a soup all you want. And this is like really bad example and analogy, but what I'm getting at is when you alter something through influences from outside, it becomes something else. And that's okay. People don't want to acknowledge that. They're like, oh, what we're doing is paganism, and Christians are doing paganism because they're keeping this stuff alive. Okay, well, couldn't you also argue that modern pagans are doing Christianity because the Christians kept it alive? Like where do you draw the line there? Like, how are you going to sit here and attack something that you don't even have a full comprehension of how it's done or way it's celebrated? So when you go to these sources and stuff, I have got a ton of books, and I've gone over my library recently. If you haven't checked out that video, go ahead and check that out. But as I'm going through these books here, a lot of them are Llewellyn books and stuff. What makes these authors so special that they have this information? How do we know they didn't just make it all up? How do we know any of it's true? Alex Sanders started what's called Alexandrian Wicca. Now, apparently, his grandmother initiated him as a witch, and it was a family tradition. In an interview, and I can show it's on YouTube. You can find it here on YouTube. You can hear Alex Sanders talking about his grandmother cutting his scrotum as part of initiating him as a witch. Okay, he's the only one who makes this claim. We can't prove it. Is it possible that his family taught him how to be a witch and he's a witch because of his grandmother? Yes. Where's all the other people that were witches around them, and how did they learn it? How do we know it's authentic? So if we just have a family tradition of things that are folky things kept alive, and that's what they did in their particular family, now we have people that are practicing Alexandrian Wicca, which is interesting. He says he's a witch, but now he's using Wicca. How do we know Alex Sanders didn't just read stuff from Gerald Gardner or, I don't know, Valerie Dorantine, I don't remember all the big names. So like, I'm checking my notes here. This is the thing. Notes are important. If you don't know something, look it up. Seriously, like look this stuff up. Don't just assume. What were some of the big names? Doreen Valentine, or someone else, Margaret Murray. How do we not know that he just read this stuff and then made up his own thing to become popular? What's the proof? We're trusting. This is passing by word of mouth. Other people have made this claim. Well, my family has passed it down. What makes your family so special? That's great that you have your own family tradition. But just like we're talking about, just like I said earlier as an example, each Christian practices Christmas different within their own family. Who are you to say that you should dictate how all quote unquote pagans practice? Now we're getting to the point of all this New Age spirituality stuff is now an interpretation. So if you're introduced from ideas from other people, from books, from TV, from forums, from internet, from people on YouTube, okay, you've been introduced by other people. Now you are making it your own. At this point, when you start practicing, you are changing it based upon your interpretation of it. There is Jean Markel or something like that. So Chris Hughes, check her out here on YouTube. Fantastic source for Celtic stuff. I'm really into the Druidry stuff. I like it a lot. We can trace this back about 300 years. We actually have evidence and records. We can trace this back to Iolo Morganlug, Welsh traditions, some Irish tales, some European British stuff. We have actual stuff we're building this on, and in most cases it's built off of stories, some archaeological finds, so we have some evidence here. Jean apparently has been known to elaborate or put his own opinion and put it in there without saying it's his own opinion. So we have someone who researches this stuff, but then throws his own opinion on it without telling you. And now people are doing it in his style and his version because he thinks it should be done this way. If we don't question that, then we start repeating it a couple hundred years later, and no one's going to know. People are going to be practicing it thinking it's this way and that way or this way. That's why every time you talk to someone, and I've mentioned this before, if you're not part of a coven, church, Hoff, or specific group that you're learning from, you are doing your own interpretation. Now that's okay. What are you looking for in your spirituality? If you were being fulfilled in your spirituality, continue to do it. But when you start dictating to others and making outlandish claims, that's what I'm trying to move people away from. I get it. This is my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. I get most of the comments that I get, not all of them. A lot of the comments I get are people telling me, well, why do you care about what other people do so much? Because I'm passionate about this stuff. I like learning, I like history, and I like research. And I've spent many years reading books that now I'm questioning what I read. So for me, at least, in 1990s, when I started looking at this stuff, spirituality, period, and then started getting more into the religious aspects and researching stuff like Ed Fitch's Grimoire of Shadows was probably 98, 99. No, it's probably 99. Probably in 1999. Started seeing some of this stuff and I started like, oh, this is cool. And I was like, I want to read more and I want to know more. And I was like, oh, this is great. Finding sources and finding things to read and then realizing I was reading stuff that might be questionable. I want to help other individuals that are at where I was, looking and seeking. That's the point of these videos. And if you've been practicing for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, I want to present the idea with you of, are you sure? Are you sure all that time that you spent? Why blindly follow anything instead of questioning and researching? Why wouldn't you want to? You can reaffirm what you've already learned, or you can change your opinion and change your mind and move forward from there. It's about learning and growing. Sharing information is something I didn't have available to me back in the 1990s. I didn't have anything but books, psychic conventions, pagan gatherings to go to. I didn't go to a lot of those. I've been to like 3 psychic conventions in my life, maybe 2 pagan gatherings. And for the most part, it was a whole bunch of people who were just looking for answers, and if they found one, they would share it with a lot of people. I like teaching, I like sharing. So I'm here on YouTube sharing my perspective of what I've learned. So if it's valuable, watch my videos and comment and interact. If it's not valuable, then move on. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Why do I care so much? Because it's an important topic to me. That's why I care so much. You can do what you want. I'm a random person on the internet. There's no reason to trust my opinion. But if what I'm saying makes sense to you and resonates with you, well, then I've been able to help you in some way, shape, or form. Inspire you to research and do things on your own, reaffirm what you already believe. That's what I'm going for here. That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I've been doing with my channel. It started out with sharing stuff that I like to share, but it's turned into helping to guide people that are lost because I've been there. And I get to talk about something I'm really passionate about and enjoy talking about. Right now, I'm looking for actual, authentic, real good resources. I'm trying to look for things. I was talking to Chris Hughes on here, as I'd mentioned. She has her own YouTube channel. Definitely check her stuff out. She was talking about recommended reading and stuff. And I was asking her about Gene Markle, who basically is known to elaborate and put his own stuff in there. And I was thinking of buying one of his books because somebody on Pagan Space mentioned that he has a great book on the Druids. And I almost bought it. It's like Druids, Celtic Priest of Nature. But there's been even reviews on there and searching up Jean that some of his stuff is elaborated. I've got his book called King of the Celts. It's the only book I've got by his. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But before I bought this book, I'm like, so what's your opinion, Chris? And she's like, mentioned what I had heard from other people that, he elaborates. Okay, cool. Thank you. And you know who she'd recommend? Ronald Hutton. And if you're into like the Celtic Druid stuff, Ronald Hutton is like for that, like Jackson Crawford is for Norse Scandinavian stuff. Now, Jackson Crawford's mostly a linguist. He understands Old Norse. He's an Old Norse specialist. He's a professor. Ronald Hutton's also a professor, and a lot of people recommend his stuff. I've got his Blood and Mistletoe, so I picked up the Druids by Ronald Hutton instead of Jean Markle's The Druids, Celtic Priest of Nature. That's not to say I'll never buy it, but looking at my sources now, questioning where the stuff comes from, going back to the original stories, I want to understand. I want to know. I don't want to just repeat it because people say so. I want to know, where is this stuff coming from? Even if it's really old, like I said, who's to say these original people that came up with this stuff know what they're talking about? You know, they had if some random crazy person gets high on something, goes out into the woods and say they saw something and they bring it back and a religion started out of it. Well, years later, 50 years later, 100 years even, let alone thousands of years later, it could turn into a religion and proof of this being existing when it's really just some person who was hallucinating. If we don't question these sources of where they came from and look for our own reason, then we're blindly following. I personally don't see value in that myself. So I would rather question and know where it's come from. And then if I am believing in something, I'm doing my own interpretation. My spiritual practice is my interpretation, which can change and shift based upon new information. But by finding these original sources, now I can read those, get closer to that first moment of interacting with the universe, and then try to experience life myself by being inspired by the thoughts of others. I'm trying to learn from the lessons, but take it down to the nuts and bolts. I'm not trying to buy the pie. I'm looking for the recipe, and I want to make my own pie. That's what I'm trying to get at through my research. Doesn't mean you have to do that, but that's what I'm trying and attempting to do. So anyway, this video probably a little bit longer than I originally intended it to be, but it's an interesting topic. And I would love to hear from you guys. You know, put in your comments below. How do you know you can trust a source? Do you care about sources, or would you rather just do it because everybody's doing it? Like what is your driving factor behind your spirituality? But anyway, yeah, as always, leave comments below. Thanks for watching. Sorry about the live. If you tried to check it out, I'll leave it up. Hopefully it's not too broken up. I don't know. Maybe I'll take it down. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. At the moment, right now, I'm probably leaving it up. But catch y'all in the next one. Thanks for watching.